I do have an intimate experience with Slipknot just because of where I was at the time. And when I really started to pick you guys up in 2004, I mean, I'm from Omaha, so I knew who you guys were.
Oh,
The
absolutely.
Iowa, yeah. Yeah. Council Bluffs, you guys would come and play at the Mid-America Center, or you'd go, and there was that field way outside of town by the Iowa School of the Deaf that you guys would, but it was when you guys were coming up, you'd play with 311 every once. I think it was 311 that come in because they were an Omaha local band.
Right.
But I tell you what, when I was in Iraq and I got into, but I even remember the day I was started and I hit that Subliminal Verses and I started listening to that album, and it was in the morning and I had been 5 months in Iraq and my head was, I mean, I was all over the place, and I was going for a jog around the green zone there in Baghdad, and it came on, and it just, I still remember it amped me up. It, not that it got me ready to go out, but it was like, man, holy, this is speaking to me. And I think that goes with a lot of veterans. And what I'm leading into is, I didn't even know you had the foundation to help veterans. And when I read that, and I think there's a lot of veterans that do. So we want to get that exposure, but there is that intimate tie-in that a lot of us have with your music, and with Slipknot's music and Stone Sour's music, because there were days like I had there in Iraq. I remember it was cloudy. It was a hellish day the day before. The night was long. And I remember going for a jog around this 2 mile loop and starting to listen to Subliminal Verses and just coming out of my funk. And
Right.
and that's something that all of us that have served can attest to with your music, whether it's you or us or Stone Sour or Slipknot or your solo stuff. So is that why you started the foundation? I mean, did you see that? And and I read the bio on your website and it sounded like it, but I just want to hear it from, and I'm not calling you a horse, brother. You're not, you're the man.
Right.
But I want to hear it from the horse's mouth. Why did you start it? And do you feel that way? And do you know that you have that connection with hundreds of thousands of us out there that have served in the global war on terror?
Right. Right. I mean, honestly, it was certainly one of the determining factors, we, we've been privileged enough to have been doing this for a long time, and doing so, I've gotten to meet so many of our fans, and so many of our fans, like you said, are ex-military or current,
Yeah.
law enforcement, emergency services. I've met so many of them who give so much, and they tell me from the heart that our music helps them get through it, man, and it has helped them on the other side in so many different ways. That was definitely something that led me to the decision. Obviously, in the bio that, I talk about my grandfather who served in the Korean War, and I have a lot of military in my family. My cousin was a Marine, was stationed in Okinawa for many years. So I have, I've got skin in the game, put it that way, and I, over the years, between the memories of that and, trying to, reconnect with the memories of my grandfather, and I don't have a lot because of what happened to him. That was certainly the kind of the catalyst for doing what I did. And for those listening who obviously don't know, my grandfather came back from the Korean War with debilitating alcoholism because of his PTSD, which they didn't call it that at the time.
Yeah.
It was battle fatigue.
Battle fatigue and shell shock is what they would call it. Yep.
So it was just something that they didn't really go any further than diagnosing it, than just kind of basically releasing you. I mean, because they didn't have the skills at the time to do it or to deal with it. So he came back. They were divorced. My grandmother and my grandfather were divorced way before I was born. So he was this figure in my life that I didn't really know. He was just this person that I would visit. I maybe visited 3 times when I was young. And he was this man who lived in a basement, who apparently I was related to, or he was homeless. Like, I don't have any really warm or meaningful memory from my grandfather.
Wow.
But and one of the last memories I have is when he was dying. He was in the VA hospital, and he had been sober for the last few years of his life, which was good, and he was remarried, he was happy, and the cirrhosis had got him, and he was shelled, and it hurt. But but it hurt in a different way, like, and I didn't even really process the fact that I didn't have a relationship with my grandfather until years later, where, I had dealt with my own trauma through music. I was dealing with my own addictions, and dealing with the fact that, for, a good chunk of time, it had pulled me away from my family because of the things that I wasn't dealing with. So, once I kind of started down that road and started kind of putting pieces together in my own head, I realized that this was something that I could help with because I had met so many people on my road, from military, like obviously, like I said, law enforcement, emergency services, and their families. And that's something that people don't always talk about, is the families as well, being part of that process. I realized what I could do was not only raise awareness for those people, but also help local groups that really don't get the spotlight. Because a lot of people talk about the national organization, obviously.
Yeah.
But what gets washed out in that message is the fact that there are so many grassroots, like homegrown groups and organizations that are trying to help veterans and the like deal with this, so that became my goal, was to honor my grandfather and my grandmother by trying to amplify those local places and try to maybe tie them together in a network, through my Taylor Foundation, and maybe get them talking to each other, getting their visibility to a point where maybe people in their own town who didn't know that they were there would see it. And it's just been a snowball effect. It's one of the things that I'm obviously I'm really grateful for the people who I'm able to work with, and the response has been fantastic, and we're just getting started.
Yeah, that's wow. I didn't know I mean, I read in the bio, but I didn't know your grandfather was that relation. That hits, honestly, that hits me hard on a personal level, just because I know what you're feeling. I know probably what he was feeling at times too. And I got through it because of my family. Like you said, family's important. Reconciled with my wife, got back with my wife, got my shit together. And a lot of veterans, that's what we do. We either go down that deep road and those demons get us, or we get on our knees and say, okay, hey, I need to unfuck myself. And we get with the family that does that. So having that support network like you're doing and giving them out there where there's things like they can find support is monumental, brother. And like I said, just when you hear Slipknot and you hear your songs, it takes us back. Doesn't matter how hard the song hits, whether your melodic voice is going or you're screaming in the microphone, it always brings us, this is what happens. This is the smile comes back. And so you brother, you have a lot of power out there to help a lot of us veterans and first responders out there. So I'm glad you're doing it. The news always hits on awful stories, terrible stories out there. We don't want to get into that. I hate that. Actually, I don't watch the news at all. I'm not on it anymore. I want a success story. Do you have any personally from the foundation or is it too early to tell? Have you just?
It's a little early. I can tell you that the response has been fantastic, and I've met so many great different groups that I've had the privilege of being able to actually go and hang out with a lot of them, and they've shared with me like a lot of the stories that they have. I don't have the names in front of me, but I mean, I'm talking about in Colorado, in Michigan, in New York State. I mean, just so many different organizations that are really, they feel the same way that I do. They are dedicated to it, and they just appreciate the fact that somebody's listening. Like, it's, to me, that I think that's half the battle, is knowing that somebody's listening, because for so long, people, the people who were supposed to be helping them weren't, or didn't really understand. They didn't have tools to understand it or identify it or know how to help them. So I think the fact that that dialogue is continuing and that conversation is, there's no stigma on that
Yeah.
conversation as much anymore. And we're being able to kind of lift that. That's what I think is so important, man. So I know that a lot of people have responded to the foundation very positively. So I mean, yeah, I mean, I'm hoping to be able to kind of keep a dog in this fight for as long as possible.